Hi everyone, it's Sam, NFTstatistics, and this is your Proof Daily NFT Countdown. Lots to talk about. Let's get right into it. Going to talk about DeGods again. Frank just keeps coming up. A little bit about exchanges, and a couple nice art sales. Let's get right into it. Volume's pretty flat versus yesterday. Market share seems to be drifting a little bit back towards OpenSea, and I think that's mainly just because there's been a bit less airdrop farming going on, so Blur's volume has gone down a fair bit. Unique buyers down a little bit from yesterday, still kind of in that lower tier versus before a couple weeks ago. I talked yesterday about how flip returns were positive for 3 days in a row, largely because of Nakamigos as well as other side. Today or yesterday, we had a down day just by a slight bit, but traders generally lost money yesterday. A couple people asked me to extend this chart a little bit further back, so I did that. What you can see here is traders, back in August 2021, when Visa bought their punk, when things were, when Ape started ripping, as well as in the beginning of 2022. Like in those days, traders were making 5,000 ETH a day, like complete and total bull market. And then ever since then, I'd say over the past year, it's been much smaller amounts, as well as a bit more negative than positive. You can see also that day where Mando and OSF, where they dumped their apes, that day was actually one of the worst days that we've ever had for traders because the people who absorbed them ended up losing a lot of money on that. In terms of prices yesterday, prices were pretty much flat on the large cap index, a little bit of strength in World of Women and Moonbirds. Mid cap index was up 3.8%. The reason was a bunch of strong performers, mainly the Jack Butcher ecosystem, OPEPin, Edition, and VV Checks, both up 20 to 30%. Here's a quick look at that OPEPin Edition chart. It just kind of keeps ripping. It got down to 0.3 ETH. Now we're back up above 0.5 ETH. And then this is VV Checks. These are the ones that have not yet been burned, so have a little bit of option value, back up around 1 ETH. Trump digital playing cards, figured I'd single these out. Saw a bit of a rally yesterday. I thought this was kind of funny. Why the rally? Well, because Donald Trump got indicted by the Manhattan grand jury. So I think what's kind of interesting here is, for Donald Trump, the people who are buying these, the people who are supporting him, the people who think Donald Trump's going to get on Twitter someday and talk about these cards, to them, they're not upset about a grand jury. That's kind of what they're against. So they see that as an opportunity to go buy. Kind of good news or bad news, it seems like people want to buy these cards. In terms of art projects, 5 projects did more than 10 ETH of volume. Going to talk about a few of those sales. This one in the upper left was an anti-cyclone sale for 24 ETH. This is a really nice sale. We've been talking about a lot of sales are below floor. Well, this was not that. This was actually, well above floor. I think the reason is it doesn't really have that grid. It's just kind of a one grid situation. A little bit of a goofy anti-cyclone, but really cool one. So congrats to the buyer and seller there. And then other pieces, Gazers for 15.1 ETH. It seems like Gazers have been trading a little bit in this 15 to 16 ETH range. You have a Meridian in the lower left that traded for 8.4 ETH. And then a Swiggle, this traded on for 9.45 ETH, but this was traded on looks rare. And this is a frozen one on OpenSea. Now we've seen on other platforms that no one seems to care about whether an asset is frozen on OpenSea or not. Perhaps it means a little bit more on art blocks because they're not tradable on Blur yet. So maybe people, still see a little bit of deduction when it comes to those. 9.45 ETH is well below where the other Squiggles traded yesterday, which were all between 10 and 11 ETH. I also wanted to touch on the Escher launches because we talked about these yesterday. How do they end up going? All of them really traded up. Again, these are editions. Escher is focused on kind of being a place that can assemble editions in one location so you can see them all for one artist. They had these 3 specific proprietary ones just to their platform that they launched yesterday. You can see that all 3 of them, the Pop Wonder one went from 0.15 to 0.26. This one in the middle went from 0.36 to about 0.9 ETH, and the last one doubled. So congrats to the buyers and sellers there. Second story to talk about, DeGods are going to ETH. We've known this for a while, but they announced it yesterday. There's a little bit more interesting stuff to this announcement, so I wanted to include it in here. A couple things. One is that gas costs are going to be free. 2, they said that royalties on ETH are going to be 0.33%. Now, there's a couple reasons this is pretty interesting. That is a very low royalty, and it's lower than the required royalty for everybody. So this is going to be one of the cheapest NFTs to trade. Blur is their official partner. Also pretty interesting. We'll touch on that. And if you migrate within a day, you have a chance to win a BTC, a Bitcoin DeGod. We know those are trading, I think like in the 15 ETH range, something like that. So interesting to see. As far as a little bit of my take on this, one is, Magic Eden recently moved to ETH, and Frank decided to go with Blur and not Magic Eden, who has kind of been his partner basically ever since the beginning. They've kind of grown the Solana ecosystem together. I thought this was kind of interesting, but not surprising. Frank wants to be all in on ETH. He's shown that. He wants to be the biggest collection on ETH. He's talked about it. So it's not surprising he's going with the project, with the platform that has the most volume on ETH. I also think value-wise, they've largely been in alignment. I mean, Frank was one of the first founders to say that he was going to zero royalties on some of his projects when he thought it was inevitable. Blur has really kind of been a little bit about it has to be tradable on chain in order to work. And so I kind of see some value alignment between Blur and Frank in general. And the royalties of 0.33%, not only does it make it cheaper than all the other projects, it actually makes it cheaper to trade on Blur than on OpenSea. The reason is that OpenSea, if your royalty is below 0.5%, OpenSea charges 0.5%. And the reason for that is because a lot of people, and I see this a ton in the data, if you have 0%, would start a 0% royalty project and then just trade with themselves, get it to the top of the leaderboard, top of the trending board, zero cost, made it very easy for inorganic volume to pop up on OpenSea. So they said, okay, if 0% royalty, we're still going to charge half of 1%. But in the case of Frank, this makes Blur cheaper actually than trading on OpenSea. So that's kind of interesting and crafty on their part. As far as volume, I put this chart together. This is volume between Blur and OpenSea of NFTs that have traded 3 ETH or higher. So if all trades at 3 ETH or higher, you can see, it's like 85% over the past week on Blur. So again, makes sense that he wanted to go there. Looking a little bit at DeGods, they're coming to ETH. Let's have a look at this project. You can see that blue line is their floor price, completely mooned on the back of this announcement. Obviously people knowing they're coming to ETH, it's got people excited, but it went up even higher from something like 650 to 790 Solana. That pink line is the US dollar floor price. So in US dollar terms, kind of around the mid area of where they've traded, but that's not that bad considering that Solana has gone from $300 to $20. So interesting to see that. Here are a few of the DeGods that have sold for the highest prices. I guess that 7,700 Solana based on current exchange rates, that's around 100 ETH. Next thing to talk about, a couple new ETH exchanges. So going to double down on talking about Magic Eden because they also announced a couple cool things. Let's get right into it. Then we'll talk a bit about art blogs. They said they're testing out an ETH marketplace. I'm kind of like, no, do we need more marketplaces in ETH? Do we need them? Let's see. Here they go. They decided to do it. They say they're launching next month with 10 partners. Now, an interesting thing about Magic Eden is one of the ways they've supported the Sol ecosystem has been by also being a launch pad for new projects. So they're, I think, going to be using that launch pad functionality to launch 10 new projects. It's something that OpenSea has been doing recently. These projects didn't jump out at me as massive ones, but Kaiju Kings, Crypto Ninja, those are two at least I've heard of. So maybe we'll be seeing new mints from them next month. Not entirely sure. I did go on to Magic Eden and try to just explore the platform, see how good it is. Right now, there's really not much supply. You can see Nakamigos, there's one at 0.3, one at 0.35. So really very little liquidity. They're pulling from X2Y2 and looks rare though. It doesn't seem like their aggregator is pulling from Seaport or from Blur. So that kind of explains. It looks like all these here are from X2Y2. I looked at Dower Darcel's, my favorite collection. And you can see that those, they have one at 0.2, one at 0.5, but that's because they're only pulling from looks rare. So I imagine they say it's just early beta. They're really doing it essentially next month. So we'll see what happens there. They also announced that they're launching Diamonds. And Diamonds is a reward system where they're basically, it's basically like trying to match what Blur is doing and reward holders. A couple interesting things here. One is that they're rewarding listings and bids. Same thing as Blur is doing. Blur just rewards you for listing your NFTs and for bidding. The interesting thing with Magic Eden, which is different, is they're only going to reward you if your bid gets taken by someone or if your bid gets, basically if you end up traded. So if you put in a bid and someone ends up accepting it, that's when they're going to reward you, which I think is different from Blur, where you basically rewarded just for having that bid there and no one accepting it. Another thing, they're going to give loyalty to people who've been around for 6 months, try to reward their whales. And the Diamonds, it's differing. It gets you allow list, launchpad access, and other degen things, devil emoji, their words, not mine. They're also doing it only on Solana. Now, a couple of things that I find really interesting here is one, everyone is chasing Blur. And the reason is you just can't compete. It's very hard to compete when everybody knows they can get free money from trading on Blur, but not elsewhere. I think this bid offers thing, that being what's rewarded, is interesting. They're using the loyalty terminology, same thing as Blur. But I think that the difference, and I think this is where it's very hard for anyone else to compete, is that Blur has a 1.6 billion market cap. Okay, and because they have a 1.6 billion in the market cap, they can give people real free money. And that's what makes them unique and gives them this competitive advantage that others don't have. I think that regulatory is holding back something like Magic Eden. Magic Eden doesn't want to force you to check a box that says you're not based in the US when you're based in the US. Magic Eden cares a little bit more about the legal framework. It's one of those interesting things. It's almost like if you're willing to not be so buttoned up on the regulatory, you end up getting this massive competitive advantage. I worked at Uber. We had similar things there. I've seen this model in action. It can work really well, but I think that's working for Blur right now. Oh yeah, one more exchange to talk about. Artblocks said that they are also creating an exchange in response to diminishing enforcement of creator royalties. A little bit about it. They say security, authenticity, and royalties. Those are the key things. Security, it's safe. Authenticity, you're getting unofficial art blocks. And royalties, of course, they want to continue to reward their artists. Here is a picture of what their exchange looks like. It's basically just the Artblocks website that we're used to. Now you have prices on the NFTs. Now I thought this was kind of interesting when they enforce royalties. So what these two pictures are side by side, that left one is OpenSea. That right one is Artblocks page. And what you can see is there's this one that I've circled in both sides. And on the left, it's 4.5 ETH. On the right, it's 4.815 ETH. Now on Artblocks, they're pulling from OpenSea, but they are seeing this is a seller who has decided not to enforce royalties, and we are going to put royalties in. If you just look at the OpenSea page, as a buyer, you don't know where royalties are being enforced and where they're not. But now looking at these two side by side, Artblocks is going to take the ones that are not enforcing royalties and enforce them for you. So as a buyer, you know that royalties are being enforced there. On the ones like the floor one at 4 ETH, that seller is clearly enforcing royalties on OpenSea, so it's the same price on both platforms. Why are they doing this? If you look at royalties over the past few months, the average royalty on Artblocks has gone from 7.5% to a little bit more than 2%. So it's down about 2/3. This is what percentage of sales are at full royalty. And you can see that right now it's only 25%. So Artblocks royalties have really gone down. They're trying to combat it. My view is basically, if people wanted to pay royalties, they still can on OpenSea. So I don't know if this is going to make a huge difference, but I do think that idea, that giving a little bit of visibility to the buyers into what they're doing, maybe there's something there. Last thing to talk about, a few notable sales. The first, Spirit Boombox Azuki, number 5070, sold for 189.69 ETH. I actually think this is a male Spirit Azuki. I think this is actually a pretty cheap price relative to where spirits have been. This is common, all on across NFTs. Grails have gone down a little bit. These are the top 4 Spirit Azukis of all time. You can see 4 sales at 249 or higher. And I think that this Boombox and red background make it pretty interesting. So interesting deal there. Next thing, there were 3 pilot helmet sales in CryptoPunks for 98, 100 basically, and 110 ETH. Now, I've been into punks for a long time, so I think this is particularly interesting. Pilot helmet is actually one of the rarest traits of the traits that are not zombies, apes, or aliens. This is the 3rd most rare trait, only behind beanies and chokers. It tended to be a grail back in the day. And I think this chart's kind of cool. If you look, this is the historic floor price of pilot helmet and punks versus the CryptoPunk floor. You can see it used to trade at like a 3, 4x, even 7, 8x premium. Like the CryptoPunk community used to really value a lot of these rare female traits. That was like a really kind of grail NFT within that collection. Over time, and certainly over the past year, as ape owners, as DGens have gotten more into NFTs, and most of the buyers tend to be male, a lot of people have been wanting just the NFTs that look like them. And there's been a much more of a priority for male NFTs that look like DGens as opposed to a lot of these female NFTs. So a lot of the grail female NFTs have gone down in relative premium. And I think that's been an interesting thing to track. Last thing to talk about, one quick super rare sale I wanted to touch on, Magnetic Truth by KingXerox. This is for 5 ETH, picture of Ethereum and all these kind of degens kind of falling right into it. KingXerox has a lot of art that really kind of is quite cynical and pokes fun at the crypto industry, but particularly the NFT industry. This one on the left, it sold for 6 ETH. I believe this is, I can't remember the title, but it's basically someone instructing people on how to make money as an NFT artist. A few of these other sales, from 11 ETH to 14.7 ETH and 8.1 ETH. He's had a bunch of nice sales. I think we're seeing this a lot, where a lot of these artists who've had huge sales are seeing these prices a little bit lower right now, just in line with the fact that NFTs haven't been selling as well, but still nice to see a 5 ETH sale for him. So congrats to him as well as the buyer. Here are a bunch of the additions. If you like this work or just want to explore, he does have some additions, which are pretty interesting. That's all from me today. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you have a great weekend. Like this, or give us a like below. Give us a comment if you have something to say, anything you want us to hear. Subscribe to the channel. We'll be back on Monday. Have a great weekend.